Okay, so picture this. You win like the biggest award in the world, right? You're celebrated as this like brilliant mind, totally dedicated to like helping humanity. But there's a twist. You have to share the stage with someone you absolutely can't stand. Or even worse, you make this huge discovery, but you don't get the credit because of who you are.
Right.
Welcome to the world of the Nobel Prize. A world full of geniuses, for sure, but also drama, controversy, and even some, like, serious backstabbing.
It's true.
Today we're diving deep into the history of this really fascinating award. We'll uncover its surprising origins, the kind of scandalous stories of some of the winners, and the ethical problems it raises, in today's world.
Ready to go?
Let's do this.
All right. So the story of the Nobel Prize, it's really a story of contradictions. It's a prize funded by a fortune built on, well, explosives.
Yeah, no kidding. The guy behind it all was Alfred Nobel, the inventor of dynamite. Talk about a complicated legacy. I mean, here's a guy whose invention was used to blast mountains, build tunnels, but also, wage war. He was known as the Merchant of Death, a title he really wanted to get rid of.
Yeah, that's where the story gets interesting. See, back in 1888, a French newspaper accidentally published Alfred Nobel's obituary. They mixed him up with his brother, and the obituary called him, yep, you guessed it, the Merchant of Death. Nobel was horrified.
I mean, can you imagine reading your own obituary and seeing that? Talk about a wake-up call.
It was a total turning point. Nobel decided to use his massive fortune to change how people saw him. In his will, he dedicated most of his wealth to setting up a bunch of prizes. Prizes that would recognize people who contributed the greatest benefit to humankind.
And that's how the Nobel Prize was born, in physics, chemistry, medicine, literature, and maybe the most ironic of all, peace.
Yeah, it is a strange paradox, isn't it? The man who profited from destruction wanted to reward those who brought peace and progress to the world. But the irony doesn't end there. The history of the Nobel Prize is full of stories of rivalry, ego, and sometimes straight-up conflict.
Okay, so spill the tea. What kind of drama went down behind those shiny medals?
Well, let's talk about the 1923 Nobel Prize in Medicine, the one awarded for the discovery of insulin. You know the story, right? Frederick Banting and John McLeod. They figured it out, isolated insulin, and changed the lives of millions of people with diabetes.
Yeah, seems pretty straightforward. A classic scientific breakthrough story. Where's the drama?
It's all about credit recognition, who gets to be in the spotlight. Banting, the guy who led the research, was furious when McLeod, his senior colleague, was named as a co-winner.
Really? Why didn't they work on it together?
Banting felt like McLeod's contribution was super small and that the real credit belonged to his lab assistant, Charles Best. To prove his point, Banting shared half of his prize money with Best.
Wow, that's a big statement. What did McLeod do?
He wasn't backing down. He shared his half of the prize money with another researcher, James Collop, who he felt had been overlooked.
So the Nobel Prize, instead of bringing these scientists together, it kind of drove them apart.
Yeah, it definitely showed the intense pressure of scientific research, especially when it comes to recognition and prestige. The insulin discovery was huge, but in this case, the Nobel Prize seemed to fuel personal conflicts instead of celebrating the science itself.
It just goes to show that even brilliant minds can get caught up in the whole ego and recognition thing. It makes you wonder, does the Nobel Prize always get it right? Does it always go to the people who actually deserve the credit?
That's a great question. And there's another story that really throws a wrench into that whole question. You've probably heard of the discovery of the structure of DNA, the famous double helix Watson and Crick, right?
Oh yeah, one of the biggest scientific breakthroughs ever.
Exactly. But there's another name that often gets left out, Rosalind Franklin. Her work was absolutely crucial to figuring out the DNA code.
What did she do?
So Rosalind Franklin was an expert in X-ray crystallography. This technique uses X-rays to create images of how atoms are arranged within molecules. It's like taking a 3D photo of something so tiny you can't even see it with a regular microscope.
Okay, I see why her work was so important. So how did she contribute to the DNA discovery?
Franklin captured this super important image called Photo 51. This image provided key evidence for the double helix structure of DNA. Without her work, Watson and Crick might never have made their breakthrough.
Wow, so why wasn't she recognized along with Watson, Crick, and Wilkins?
Tragically, Franklin died of cancer in 1958, 4 years before the Nobel Prize was given out for the DNA discovery. And the Nobel Prize can't be awarded after someone dies.
That's really sad. But even if she had been alive, do you think she would have gotten the recognition she deserved?
That's a question that's still debated today. Some people argue that Franklin's contributions were downplayed by her male colleagues, that the sexism in the scientific community at the time prevented her from getting the credit she was due.
Her story is a powerful reminder that the Nobel Prize, while it's supposed to celebrate greatness, can also reflect the biases, and unfairness of the time it was given.
It is a sobering thought. And it leads us to ask whether the Nobel Prize, with its focus on individual awards, can really handle the complexities of modern science.
I'm really curious to hear more about that. What are some of the challenges the Nobel Prize is facing today?
I think one of the biggest is that the Nobel Prize can only go to a maximum of 3 people. That made sense like 100 years ago. But these days, science is a team effort.
Totally. Think about the Human Genome Project or the Large Hadron Collider. Those are huge collaborations with hundreds, even thousands of researchers working together.
Right. So how do you pick just 3 winners when a discovery comes from a global team effort? This limit forces them to narrow it down in a way that feels random, and it doesn't recognize most of the people involved.
It's like giving an Oscar to the director and like the 2 main actors, but ignoring the whole film crew, the composers, the costume designers, everyone who actually made the movie.
Exactly. And that's a great way to put it. It shows this basic problem with trying to fit a collaborative process into an individual award system. A perfect example is the 2017 Physics Prize for the discovery of gravitational waves. I mean, that was huge. Think about it. Ripples in space-time from black holes colliding billions of years ago finally being detected here on Earth.
It was mind-blowing. Seriously, a huge win for science.
Totally. And while the prize went to 3 physicists who played big roles, the discovery actually involved over 1,000 researchers from all over the world, all working together as part of the LEGO scientific collaboration.
So most of the people who made this discovery happen weren't even recognized by the Nobel Prize.
Exactly. And that brings up a bigger question. Can the Nobel Prize as it is now really reflect how collaborative modern science is? It's not about lone geniuses anymore. It's about teams, networks, collective intelligence.
So it seems like the Nobel Prize is having trouble keeping up. And it's not just about how many people are involved, right? It's also about which areas of study get recognized.
You got it. That's another big limitation.
Yeah.
The Nobel Prize categories we have now were set up in 1895. Back then, no one could have imagined things like computer science, artificial intelligence, environmental science, climate change research. I mean, these fields are shaping our world in huge ways, but they don't have a place at the Nobel Prize table.
It's kind of ironic, actually. Some of the most important issues we face today, like climate change, they don't even have a chance at a Nobel Prize. Does that mean the Nobel Prize isn't the best way to recognize important work in the 21st century?
That's a good question. And it's one a lot of people are thinking about as we try to figure out how to celebrate and encourage progress in a world with increasingly complicated challenges.
And then there's the Nobel Peace Prize, which always seems to stir up controversy.
Ah, yes, the Peace Prize. It's supposed to recognize people or groups who've done a lot for peace, but the choices they make often cause a lot of debate. I mean, what one person sees as a peacemaker, someone else might see totally differently.
I guess that's because peace is a pretty subjective thing.
Right. It's hard to define. And the way they choose the Peace Prize winner is inherently political. The Nobel Committee, the folks in Norway, often make decisions based on their specific worldview.
So who are some of the most controversial people who've won the Peace Prize?
Well, Henry Kissinger, the U.S. Secretary of State during the Vietnam War, he won in 1973 with the North Vietnamese negotiator Le Duc Tho. A lot of people criticized Kissinger's role in the war and questioned if he was really committed to peace.
Yeah, I can see why that was controversial. Any others?
Barack Obama winning in 2009, just 9 months into being president, that raised a lot of eyebrows. The committee said it was for his extraordinary efforts to strengthen international diplomacy and cooperation between peoples.
Wasn't that a little early, though? Giving him the prize before he really did anything concrete on the world stage?
A lot of people thought so. Yeah, they felt like it was more of a symbolic thing, supporting his intentions more than acknowledging any real peacemaking achievements.
Those examples really show how the Nobel Peace Prize is often tied up with politics and different ideas about what it means to contribute to peace. It seems like even with a prize as big as the Nobel Prize, you can't escape human judgment and political influence.
That's true. The Peace Prize forces us to face a tough reality. There's no one definition of peace that everyone agrees on, and our own values, experiences, and perspectives shape how we see people who say they're working for peace.
It sounds like we've uncovered a lot of problems with the Nobel Prize. But even so, it's still super influential, right?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Even with its flaws, the Nobel Prize captures people's imaginations. It's more than an award.
Yeah.
It's like a cultural phenomenon that speaks to our deepest desires. Things like wanting to learn, yearning for peace, wanting to make a difference.
So what is it about the Nobel Prize that still resonates so much, even with all these limitations?
I think it's about storytelling. The Nobel Prize doesn't just recognize achievements, it weaves them into this narrative of human progress. It creates heroes and icons.
You mean like how winning a Nobel Prize puts you on a whole other level? You become part of this exclusive club of brilliant minds who've changed the course of history?
Exactly. Think about names like Albert Einstein, Marie Curie, Martin Luther King Jr. These people are bigger than their specific fields. They become symbols of human ingenuity, courage, and perseverance. Think about how their stories inspire you, their struggles, their breakthroughs, their impact on the world.
They represent the idea that even when things are incredibly tough, one person can make a difference.
And the Nobel Prize reinforces that. It tells us that these people achieve something truly exceptional, that they push the limits of what's possible. And that, in turn, inspires others to reach for their own potential.
So the Nobel Prize is like a positive feedback loop, inspiring future generations to push the boundaries of what humans can know and achieve.
Yeah, exactly. It reinforces this idea that anyone with enough passion and hard work can leave their mark on the world. That's a powerful message, and one of the reasons why the Nobel Prize still holds so much weight, even with its issues.
But even with all that inspiration, we still have to deal with the fact that the Nobel Prize might be out of touch with the 21st century. So what can we do? How can we rethink how we recognize greatness?
We need to be bold. We need to reimagine what's possible. One idea is to move away from that strict three-person limit. Imagine a Nobel Prize that recognizes entire research teams, that captures the true spirit of collaborative science.
I love that. It would shift the focus away from competition between individuals and highlight the power of working together.
Exactly. And think about adding new categories that reflect the most urgent problems of our time. Imagine a Nobel Prize for climate change solutions, or a Nobel Prize for artificial intelligence ethics.
It would be like saying to the world, these are the things that matter. These are the areas where groundbreaking work is happening.
Exactly. And what about the Peace Prize? How do we make it more effective and less controversial when it comes to recognizing real contributions to peace?
I'm listening. What do you think?
Maybe we need to make the selection process more open with clear rules for what counts as a contribution to peace. Or maybe we need to look beyond individual peacemakers and recognize grassroots movements or organizations working on the ground to solve conflicts and build a more peaceful world.
Those are some really interesting ideas. It seems like we're at a turning point. The Nobel Prize has this amazing legacy, but it also needs to adapt to stay relevant and impactful in the 21st century.
You're absolutely right. For anything to stay meaningful, it has to evolve. The Nobel Prize could continue to inspire and recognize human achievement for generations to come, but it needs to be open to change.
It's fascinating to think that Alfred Nobel, the guy who invented dynamite, also gave us this powerful way to celebrate the best of humanity. Now it's our job to figure out how to make that celebration more inclusive, representative, and meaningful for the world we live in today.
Well said. It reminds us that even the best intentions can have unexpected outcomes. Real progress requires constant reflection, reevaluation, and a willingness to adapt.
This deep dive has been amazing. From the explosive origins of the Nobel Prize to the controversies and limitations it faces today, we've really dug in. It's made me think about how we define greatness, how we recognize achievement, and how we can better celebrate the people who are trying to make the world a better place.
It's been great exploring these ideas with you. It's so interesting to peel back the layers of familiar stories and find the complexities underneath.
So let's wrap up with one final thought-provoking question for our listeners. You've heard the stories, you've explored the complexities. Now, as you learn about the incredible work being done all over the world, I want you to ask yourself, who do you think deserves recognition? And how can we create systems that truly celebrate the collaborative, diverse, and multifaceted nature of human achievement?
It's a question worth thinking about because recognizing and celebrating greatness isn't just about awards and accolades. It's about recognizing the power of human ingenuity, compassion, and the drive to make a positive impact on the world. It's been really cool looking at the legacy of the Nobel Prize, but what does it all mean for us,
Right, like we're not all going to win Nobel Prizes.
Yeah.
So what can we actually take away from all this, this deep dive into all these geniuses and the controversies? Does it apply to our lives?
Yeah, I think it does. You see the Nobel Prize story. It's really a story about being human, about our drive to achieve, to be recognized, to make a difference. I mean, those are desires we all have.
Yeah.
Whether you're a scientist, an artist, or just someone trying to do good in the world.
So what are some of the big takeaways?
Yeah.
What can we learn from exploring the Nobel Prize and all its, complexities?
Well, first of all, I think it reminds us that progress rarely happens alone.
Right.
Almost every big achievement, whether it's a scientific discovery or a social movement, it comes from collaboration, teamwork, Lots of people contributing.
It's easy to just focus on the famous names of people on stage getting the awards.
Yeah.
But there are always so many people behind them.
Exactly.
Working hard to make that success happen.
Right. Think about the researchers, the technicians, the support staff. But their work is crucial.
Yeah, it's a good reminder to appreciate those unsung heroes,
Yeah.
the collaborators, the people behind the scenes making things happen.
And this is true for so much more than just science. Think about any successful project, any movement for change.
Yeah.
There are always people working hard behind the scenes, people whose contributions deserve to be acknowledged and celebrated.
It's about seeing the power of collective effort and valuing what every member of the team brings.
Absolutely. Another important takeaway from the Nobel Prize story is to question assumptions. Just because something's been done a certain way for ages doesn't mean it's the best way or the fairest way.
Like how the Nobel Prize categories are still stuck in the late 1800s, scientifically speaking.
Right.
While fields like computer science and climate change research are changing our world, but they're not even considered.
Exactly. The Nobel Prize story reminds us to be open to new ideas, new ways of thinking, new ways of recognizing and rewarding achievement.
So being adaptable, recognizing that the world is always changing, and how we see greatness needs to change too.
Right. And this idea of being adaptable, of questioning assumptions, it applies to everything in life, whether it's challenging old traditions, advocating for more inclusive systems, or just being open to different perspectives. It's about being willing to evolve and adapt as the world changes.
The Nobel Prize story also makes you think about your own legacy.
Yeah.
It makes you ask, what kind of impact do I want to have?
Yeah.
What do I want to be remembered for?
It's like what Alfred Nobel went through with that wrong obituary. It made him realize he could decide how he'd be remembered, and he could use his wealth to support something bigger than himself.
Yeah, we might not all be able to start a global prize, but we can all make choices that shape how we're remembered.
Right.
Every day we have chances to contribute to something bigger than ourselves through our work, our relationships, our actions in our communities.
Exactly. The Nobel Prize story at its core is about human potential. It's about the power of ideas to change the world, the drive to explore the unknown, and the desire to leave a positive mark on history.
It's been a wild ride, this deep dive, hasn't it?
It has.
From dynamite to DNA, from peace prizes to scientific controversies, we've really explored the Nobel Prize and how it affects our world.
It's been great going on this journey with you, and I hope it's made you think critically about how we recognize and celebrate achievement and how we can all work towards a better future.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, we'll leave you with this final thought. The Nobel Prize is a powerful reminder of the incredible things humans are capable of. But it also challenges us to think beyond individual awards and to work together to create a world where everyone has the chance to reach their full potential.
That's a great point. It's a reminder that recognizing and celebrating greatness isn't just about trophies and ceremonies. It's about seeing the power of human ingenuity, compassion, and the drive to make a real difference in the world.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the Nobel Prize. It's been quite a journey.
Yeah.
See you next time.